Hey friends, this is Boomy here. I'm not typically a huge drama frog, sometimes a little bit, but I wanted to highlight an SCA relevant post from a few days ago. It blew up and caused a good bit of heated engagement. The original post was from Aiden Conroy here in the Anterior Rapier Combat group, and it goes like this. Do we need to have another discussion about people's attitudes when it comes to stiff hits? Imagine my surprise, not, when I hear yet another tale of an SCA fighter chewing out a newer fighter because they hit too hard. It needs to stop. It's not peer-like. It's not chivalric. This community has tolerated and cultivated an incredibly shitty attitude, and it has driven away people from both the SCA and our Rapier community. I've never heard anyone tell me that they stopped or don't want to go to an SCA practice because they're worried about being hit. I have heard innumerable people state that they don't want to go to SCA fighters, fighters whine constantly whenever they get a bruise. I've heard students complain about it. I've heard former SCA fighters complain about it, and I've heard current SCA fighters complain about it. I've heard crossover heavy fighters complain about it. So a lot of the first bit is just anecdotal experience and evidence for the point which is right here. I'm going to be blunt. If you get hit hard, it is your fault almost 100% of the time. I would say 3/4 of the time I see SCA people complain about a stiff shot, and it's because they were lunging into attack. Here's a tip. If you're moving forward when you got hit stiff, it is your fault. The other quarter of the time is because the person wasn't moving. You should not and cannot expect your opponent to essentially miss you because they were aiming just where you are standing. You need to retreat, you need to use your measure, and you need to parry and defend yourself. If you are not doing these things and you get bruised, your fault. That was the main point of this post, to my understanding. I've been to multiple tournaments across many states, and the general consensus is I've heard that SCA fighters are essentially wusses. They have a reputation for complaining when they get hit hard, especially when it's their fault. It makes people not want to participate. It drives away people who are participating when it happens. It's shitty behavior, and it needs to stop ASAP. So this was the original post. If you get hit hard, it is your fault almost 100% of the time, is something that I and many of the respondents really vehemently disagree with. And to me, there are three main causes for a hard hit in a tourney bout. There's person A, there's person B, or shit happened. And often enough, it is some blend of the three. It is not typically just one factor. I do believe it is reasonable to engage in swordplay with the expectation of some bruises, because we are engaged in combat after all. But it is also reasonable to expect your opponent to attempt to mitigate delivering blows such as a concussion or separated ribs. I believe it is incumbent on the experienced fighter to identify the issue of someone yeeting themselves forward without the knowledge or the experience to know better, and to teach them footwork and fine measure control. That's a fine point. But it also is incumbent upon the experienced fighters to teach folks how to break their kinetic chain in their arm when someone is yeeting themselves forward without any concern for their own or your well-being. For instance, you can take your blade, instead of linking everything forward, you can break here at the elbow, you can break here at the wrist in either direction, or you can do the paintbrush technique where you place the tip and then drag your blade against the weak of the blade in order to put all of the force into the bend of the blade as opposed to directly into your opponent. When we look at some of the responses, this is just a top comment here, says, it isn't safe for me to take a hard hit without more armor than I currently have. I'm being respectful of my opponents and staying off the field because I understand that accidents happen and I don't want to be hurt or make someone feel bad for hurting me. Let's be clear though, Rapier in Anterior is a touch sport, and if a fighter is consistently hitting hard enough to bruise, that fighter is not calibrating appropriately. That's not an accident. I agree with the post. The idea is if you have a medical condition or if you are unable to participate in a safe way, yes, there is some responsibility to take yourself off the field or to understand that some of those shots will come in hard. However, unfortunately, the original poster doubles down and says some people can't fight. It's a sad reality of it. Not everyone will be able to fight Rapier due to their medical reasons. If you are getting hit hard enough to get bruised, you are not parrying properly and you're not using measure properly. That is something you can solve, not anyone else. Regardless of the context, because in some context it is true, it is nevertheless a very blunt and curt way of stating that point, as opposed to giving the nuance of being able to work with the person that you are playing with to minimize the injury risk. You can see there's a bunch of responses to the hard hits conversation. This particular post I agree with the idea that, if the attacker misjudged the distance and the recipient closed the distance while the shot was thrown, both were closing distance. The defense didn't happen on either end, and both are at fault. This is a fairly common interaction, especially with two experienced and physically capable fighters. Sometimes you deliver hard blows, and that is where that expectation of some amount of damage to happen, because it is in fact a combat sport, and we don't all parry perfectly all the time. Here's a good example of John and I here at the end of the Rose tournament from this past Gulf Wars. We're here in the finals, and you'll notice that I throw what I think is a hard blow. I thought he was going to stand further back. I apologized to him after the fact immediately. I throw the shot. I hit him. And then I can already feel the reaction of keeping an angle here. We're here turned a little bit more so in 4. And I am intentionally letting my arm come across my body here at the elbow. You can see there's not this kinetic linkage that stays in place when I deliver the blow. It is letting everything kind of go past me in terms of force, as opposed to reinforcing it through my shoulder and into my body. So I took away 2 main points from reading through these threads. 1, use long-form communication, meaning use more words. It allows for nuance, and this is regardless of whether you're talking to a romantic partner or domestic partner, or just to a friend or to a random person you don't know in a tournament bout. The idea is that if you communicate more, you can be on the same page, whether you want to play at tournament speed, whether you want to just practice a particular action. You really get into the weeds of what the expected calibration can be, and that can be determined beforehand. More communication, though it's more work, is absolutely worth it. 2, extending grace. One of the biggest points that I want to take away from this is, regardless of someone's take, opinion, actions in a moment, the goal, I believe, of our community is to ideally rehabilitate and not to punish. The idea is, when folks make a mistake, if you throw a hard shot, the goal is to teach them how to mitigate that in the future, as opposed to saying, how dare you throw a hard shot? I want to kick you out of the community. Educating those around you is a way to foster a much healthier community, and extending grace to those as they are continuing on their journey and learning how to be better than they were. To that point, here is the apology a few days later from the original poster, and it says, based on a number of conversations I've had over the last couple of days, I think I need to apologize for some things, to clarify some things. First of all, I would like to apologize for letting my posts devolve into personal attacks, hyperbole, and generalizations, and things got heated, and I did not respond as well as I could have, and I am sorry. To clarify my stance, when I said it's your fault if you get hit hard, I meant it in the same way that it's your fault if you get hit, period. When I get hit, I think about the mistake I made, what I can do better, and then the next time to not get hit, regardless of whether it is a light hit or a hard hit. I find it more productive to think about what I can do better and focus on the hard hit. This is a great example of it is better to take time to elaborate, to communicate using more words and more nuance, rather than putting out your point in a short manner and allowing for a lot of miscommunication to happen. To continue, it may have gotten lost in all the posts, but I want to reiterate that I never intend to imply that fighters should have free reign to hit as hard as they want and break ribs and give concussions. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. I also realize that some of what I said should have been better framed as a discussion about whether lightest touch should continue to be a standard of our rule set, rather than suggesting people should aim 1 to 3 inches beyond their targets, since, as some people have pointed out, that is not compatible with the rules that we fight under. A more nuanced take would have been to say that if you know your opponent always retreats when you lunge, you can put an extra 1 to 3 on the lunge to hit them just right. Again, long-form communication, way better stated than the original post. Starting today, I will begin working more with students to teach them how to throw shots with good calibration using techniques that lessen the chances of hard hits. After all, a hit with perfect calibration is also the most effective, since you don't have to give up any extra measure. I will also work on teaching how to properly employ SCA blow calling conventions and honor, and always keep working to be a better exemplar of these things. I know the damage I've done with my posts can't be undone in a day, but I value the SCA Rapier community and hope that over time I can regain some trust. I'm happy to talk civilly with anyone who has hard feelings. Finally, I would like to apologize to my friends and fellow Tigers. I put you in a difficult position, but I appreciate the feedback. I thought this was a fantastic apology. It used long-form communication to communicate their points. And to my second point, I believe it is good to see the growth from other folks and to encourage that sort of growth and introspection. It is good to see that sort of growth and change in somebody. This goes to my first point of I would prefer to see people grow and change and be better than they were rather than just outright punishment and pitchforks. I understand there's times and nuance in that particular conversation, but all in all, I would like to see our community continue to grow, to be better, and to have these harder conversations that really ends up benefiting all of us as we move forward. Let me know if you agree in the comments down below. I'll see you next time.